So I wanted to kick this one off because, obviously this is near and dear to my heart. I spent 18 years at CHFA and a shorter period of time at the Division of Housing. So if I was going to introduce any panel other than the first one, this is one that I definitely wanted to do. So with us today, we have a couple of representatives of the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, and we're going to talk about some development financing tools. We have a representative from the Colorado Division of Housing, which is part of the Department of Local Affairs. And lastly, we have an actual housing developer with us to talk about that side of the financing equation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let these guys kick it off.
So just, yeah, we need a
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Falleson, and I'm one of the commercial loan officers at CHFA. And today I'm going to represent the multifamily housing finance division at CHFA and talk about our programs, our financing programs to help build affordable housing. And I'm going to be working with Denise DeBroy. We're going to kind of tag team this presentation as she gets into the tax credit side of things. But I wanted to start off with just like,
sorry, it's beeping at you. Sorry, I just want to make sure I get you a presentation quicker. So this one's dead. So apologies. 1 second, let me go get it all set up.
is rolling.
You can still use the arrows to keep clicking through if you want to keep going. So,
okay, I just wanted to lay some groundwork about CHFA. Many of you probably have heard of CHFA. I'm sure you have, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. We were established in 1973 by the Colorado Housing Assembly, or General Assembly, excuse me. And it's not probably well known, but we're not a state agency. We don't receive any tax dollars to operate. We're self-funding, so to speak, and so we don't receive any direct appropriations. We have a board of directors, 11 members, which govern our organization. CHFA, back in 1982, CHFA's mission was, it grew to be able to do economic activity. So the General Assembly gave us additional powers to do not only housing, but to do economic development as well. So to date, well, actually, as of 2023, we've done about $35.3 billion of we've raised and invested that kind of those dollars into the state of Colorado. We're having one of our best years, and so we expect those numbers to be will increase significantly as we go forward. I like to throw this slide up here because it really does, I think, in a nutshell, tells what we do at CHFA. So you see homeless shelters and transitional housing, permanent supportive housing at 30% AMI. So this housing continuum kind of shows what we do at CHFA. We get into the affordable rental housing, which targets in households with 30 to 80% of the area median income. And that green box is what Denise is really going to focus on today. We get into the blue box. That's our first-time homebuyer program, targeting households at 50% of the area median income and above. And then we get into the middle income rental housing, which targets households at 80 to 120%. And this is where I want to give a shout out to Tim. Tim was a person that was behind the creation of the middle income housing program, which I'm going to talk a little bit about here in a moment. So how do we create affordable housing at CHFA or here in the state? There are really two components that we feel that come together and help to subsidize affordable housing. One is an asset subsidy, and one is an income subsidy. So rent vouchers are a type of rent subsidy that we see in many of our housing projects. And the last session talked about how important project-based rental vouchers are to making a big impact for the clients that you wish to serve. Asset subsidies are those types of loan programs and tax credits and so forth that go to help bring down help to make the project affordable to tenants. And so it's a combination of an asset subsidy, which is going to be the primary conversation today with you all, and then the rent vouchers or the rent subsidy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Denise. I'm going to come back and finish up with some of the other programs.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. So the Tax Reform Act came into play in 1987. It was passed in 86. We did get a couple applications in 86, and they were in pencil. So just going through those archives was quite fun. A lot of eraser marks. It was administered by the IRS Treasury, and every state receives tax credits. It is, and there's an administrator, so a housing finance authority administers in every state. Sometimes it's under the governor, and sometimes it's appointed. So we've been appointed to administer this program. We have 3.7 million units created nationwide, and it's one of the most successful affordable housing finance programs since its creation. 80,000 units for Colorado, and that is just huge. So if you look, and I know my kids used to get so tired of, yes, Mom, we know that's a tax credit deal. So you really can point them out, but unless you know their tax credits, they just usually are seamless, and you don't know that they're tax credit. So the next slide, we have what is called a qualified allocation plan. And this is the plan that sets forth all of our processes, how we get, how you get awarded a project, and we just lay it out. Every state has to do this annually or biannually. Ours is a 2-year plan, and we're just successful at getting it approved by our board, and it's off to the governor now. But the plan sets forth guiding principles, criteria for approval, and the priorities that CHFA has, as well as dates of applications and and sort of the process of and meeting those minimum thresholds. So, competitive rounds. We have 2 rounds every year, and we have a non-competitive bond application process as well. So round 1 and round 2 are oversubscribed by at least at a minimum 3 to 1, sometimes 4 to 1, which means that it's highly competitive. You want to come in when your project is truly been vetted and ready to go and shines, because it is quite a long process and it's quite an investment into these projects. But it's designed like the round 1 is what I call the Cadillac round. It's the 9% round, and new in 2025 will include state credit. The affordability are the reason why it's the Cadillac is it generates the most equity from investment. So when they sell those tax credits, it comes in about 70% of the total project costs that it covers. And there's another slide further down that explains it better. Round 2 is state competitive credits, and we pair that with 4% bonds, or 4% federal credits, excuse me, and use tax exempt bonds. And that one is very competitive. And then the federal 4% credit we take through every month except for February, August, and December. And typically, when a bond project does come in for the federal 4% credits, they are bringing their own bond cap. So, as I explained a little earlier, the competitive nature of the project. So, with the 9%, it is really population-based as how much credits each state gets. So for us, we get about 15 million a year to allocate. We get about probably upwards of 30, 40 million in requests and can allocate only about 15 million. So therein lies the competition. We are going to pair it again with state credit this year or in 2025. Round one begins February 1st. And with the 4% tax credits, again, it's that 30% present value, which is the amount of equity that comes in when you sell those 4% credits. So I like these pie charts because it kind of shows that capital stack, how much the federal credits really help with funding developments. So you have the federal credits at 65%, used to be about 70%, but it's gone down a little bit. You have soft funding, 13%, and senior debt, and that's your construction and perm debt, and then a deferred developer fee. And that the developer fee is very typical in these transactions. For the federal 4%, with state credits, you see that only 33% of the federal credits from the federal side contributes to the capital stack, and 15% of the state credits, and that comes up to almost 50%. So you're going to have larger senior debt, soft funding, and probably a larger deferred developer fee. And these are just overall estimates. You know, every project is different, but in general, this is your capital stack. And then new this year, our state legislators were very busy in 2024. So we have 2 new state credits that will be rolled out in 2025. And one is middle income housing tax credit, and the other is transit oriented communities, TOC housing tax credits. The middle income tax credit is a standalone project or standalone funding. So it will not be paired with the tax credit program. It'll have a separate allocation plan, which is going to be on our website. And it serves 80% to 120% of area median income. And the reason why it's not paired with the tax credit program is because our tax credit program will go up to 80%. So this is a standalone project for that middle income, that missing middle. It will go up to 140% AMI in rural resort areas. And then we have the transit-oriented communities, TOC housing tax credit. This one is a 5-year credit as well, and it's paired with LIHTC and will be part of those competitive rounds. So it's just another small funding source. To be in a TOC is how we call it. In a TOC, you have to, those are really Metro Denver, kind of the Front Range, which includes Fort Collins and Colorado Springs at this time. So the maps are, both of these plans are on our website. They're preliminary right now. We're hoping to have the draft up in December and fully approved in time for January 1st. And back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Denise. I wanted to recognize some of my colleagues in the back of the room. I'm going to be talking about our programs from a very high level, but we all, as a team of originators, we kind of specialize in specific areas of finance. And our team is led by Terry Bernard in the back. Terry, orange shirt. We got David Faust. He runs our Prop 123 program, which I'm going to talk about in very general terms. And we got Lynn Archuleta, who specializes in our middle income access program. Thank you for raising your hand. So I'm going to talk about what I do primarily, I suppose, is while we're all able to originate different types of loans under different types of programs, we kind of dabble in very specific programs. And I kind of work on the PAB deals, the large multifamily projects that require an allocation of what are called private activity bonds. And the private activity bond is a resource that's provided by the federal government to all the states in the nation get an allocation of PAB. And Wayne can speak to this in much greater detail than I can, but he probably will later. And but what we do, private activity bonds are used for private purposes. So private developers are building affordable housing as opposed to governmental bonds, which are used to finance roads and bridges and public schools and so forth. So the bonds that we allocate, the proceeds from the sale of those private activity bonds are used to make loans to developers. The PAB financing is paired with the 4% tax credit program. And it requires at least 50% of the aggregate basis, which is land and eligible basis, to be financed with private activity bonds. That's known as the 50% test. So when a developer comes to us on the debt side, and I'm going to just go back to, I go too far. This slide, right? So we're the financing that I work in is in the orange, the senior debt, the 20% for a 9% deal, and the 40% in the as a 4% project. So we are making loans to developers after they've received their tax credit allocations. Developers will approach us and ask for letters of intent. We'll look at their numbers. We'll run it in our model. We'll give them a letter of interest, excuse me, and they will put that letter of interest in their application. Once they get it out, if they're lucky to get an allocation of tax credits, we'll come back and offer them a term sheet. We'll do another deep dive into the pro forma. We'll offer them a term sheet at that point. On the 9% side, there are two programs that we use. One would be for loans from about 1 million to 3 million. That's called our simple program. That does not require there's no federal requirement in terms of the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. So that's a HUD insurance. It does not have HUD insurance, which is what I'm trying to say. On a 9% deal, the simple program, 1 to 3 million, does not require HUD risk share insurance, which therefore does not carry with it the other strings attached, like the NEPA and the environmental assessment, and as well as the prevailing wage requirements. We have another program called our SMART program, which is from 3 to 6 million for a 9% deal, which does carry those requirements. I'm going to talk a little bit about middle income and small scale here. I mentioned our middle income access program, which is administered by Lynn Archuleta in the back, is a program that we're very proud of, and that we've done some work on here in the last several years since it's been created. The program addresses the middle income workforce, sometimes referred to as the missing middle, with incomes too high for the housing tax credit program. But often overburdened by market, it's too high for housing tax credits. We're talking about 80 to 120% of the area median income, whereas tax credits is at 60. Typically, the missing middle is comprised of renters whose income is between the 80 and 120% of the area median income, as I mentioned. The Middle Income Access Program is mezzanine financing, so it's secondary financing. So you have a primary lender who has the first lien in the deal. We come in, CHFA does with this program, and can provide up to $6 million. Loan sizes are two to 6 million. Second deed of trust, as I mentioned, 6% interest rate. It can be interest only during construction, and it's fixed during the perm period. There's an exit fee associated with it, and the affordability restrictions are for 10 years of the term of the loan, which is greater regardless of the payoff. So you might ask how the Middle Income Access Program can be used for the clientele that we're wishing to serve here, the IDD clients. Well, you could have a situation, I suppose, where that you have a family with an IDD individual who is middle income but wants to provide, that is in need of some housing, and we can finance that sort of deal. The preservation program is a different program. I don't have a slide for that, but it's a program that provides, again, secondary financing up to $1 million at 2.5% interest rate. And it's a great program for acquiring and rehabbing existing multifamily housing that is naturally occurring affordable. So that is an individualized program there that we have at CHFA. I'm going to talk now about Prop 123. I'm sure you all heard a lot about Prop 123 in the news. It is a great new program, one that's very exciting for all of us here at CHFA and for the state of Colorado. As you can see, $160 million for the State Affordable Housing Fund in 2022 to 23, $318 million, 23 to 24. I'm going to focus primarily on the 60%. So the Affordable Housing Financing Fund, which is what it's called, it's oftentimes referred to as Prop 123. The first year we had $96 million to allocate. Year two, $191.3 million to allocate. And I have some statistics that I want to just talk a little bit about. And again, David Falleson in the back of the room is our resident expert and can get into more of this in detail if you'd like to visit with him. Concessionary debt, we've received 38 applications in the first round, totaling $113 million. 7 of the 38 applications were invited to move forward with full underwriting. And that represented $14.5 million. So we awarded 7 projects, $14.5 million of concessionary debt. So that concessionary debt is coming behind that senior debt, right? So it's subsidy. It's a subsidy at a lower interest rate, which helps make these projects more affordable. The equity piece is as part of the Prop 123 program, there's an equity program that we can do. So as you can see the numbers here in terms of the concessionary debt and now the equity. So we had the $37.6 million in year one, $76.5 million we'll be allocating in year two. The statistics on that so far is that we received applications in April. 36 applications were received, requesting $313 million. In July, it was announced that 6 projects were selected, totaling $39.3 million in funding. And Tall Towns was one of the programs or projects that were funded under that first round of equity financing. We had a secondary round called the Strategic Investment Round. We opened that up in August. 15 applications were received, totaling $98.6 million. Awarded 3 projects, totaling $21 million. And then we just opened up a new concessionary round. We'll call it the second round. Applications were due August 15th. 15 applications were received, totaling $48 million. And selections will be announced in January of 2025. So we're really, that program is going to have quite an impact on the state of Colorado in and of itself, we feel, because it's an ongoing allocation from the legislature for the purpose of developing affordable housing. One program that I did not have in the slide here, which I want to talk about, and because I didn't include it because we did not, at the time that I put the slides together, we were not yet awarded, and that's our Capital Magnet Fund. I'm happy to announce that on Wednesday this last week, Chapel was informed that it was awarded $4.5 million. Funds available in early 2025. And that Capital Magnet Fund is used as secondary finance, second lien debt behind the perm for both 4% and 9% projects, 4% tax credit projects, 9% tax credit projects. And it must be used to finance projects where the tenants have income at or below 50% of the area median income. In the past, the history on the Capital Magnet Fund is that we've done $33 million of allocation to 45 projects, creating 3,191 housing units. So I think that what I wanted to just close with is saying that we're very fortunate here in the state of Colorado to have so many different financing programs to do affordable housing. And it's one of the very few states that we should be very proud of that. I know of a number of other state housing finance agencies that they have state tax credits and maybe a state housing trust fund, but that's about it. So we're very fortunate to have such a progressive progressive set of programs to effectuate the development of affordable housing in the state. So with that, there's our contacts. If you have any questions, and we're happy to take those questions and work with you all. Thank you for your time. All right, thank you.
Go. That's cool.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Schevets. I'm an affordable and workforce housing developer for an organization called Volker. We're actually a new company that just pulled together last year. I recently joined them this year from 6.5 years with Gorman and Company, and prior to that, working for Boulder Housing Partners. So our company is national, but I am local here in Boulder. I'm going to go real fast because we're short on time and Wayne needs to also present. So real quick here, just this image shows the total development costs to build housing. And then the light blue is rental revenue from reduced rents. So affordable housing is wonderful because it can provide housing for people at different incomes. But when you have reduced rents, you have a much larger gap to fill. So the dark blue shows the gap that you need to fill with all the other resources that might be available. So in the state of Colorado, I'm not going to go through each of them individually, but it includes tax credits and loan products like Mike and Denise were talking about, charitable donations, vouchers, deferred developer fee is really huge. So when I'm looking at a new development, the initial project considerations would be, who's your target population? Who are your partners? Who are your project champions? Pick a developer that really knows what they're doing. The location that you're looking at, does it have adequate zoning to provide the housing that you need? Timeline, primary source of funding. I'm a light tech developer, so I'm looking at, is it a 9% or a 4%? Does it include state tax credits? the teams are complex and there are a lot of players in affordable housing. So that's your developer, your owner, your property manager, service providers, especially in the housing for the neuro-inclusive communities, lender, equity investor, governmental partners, general contractor. Your design team alone has many, many pieces and parts. And then lawyers, there's a lot of lawyers that you pay to get these communities completed. I was fortunate enough to participate in a housing community in Denver, the development of the Elizabetta in partnership with Laird, and I was at Gorman and Company. They are the ones who own and manage this community, but it was a true partnership. Laird owned the land and they leased the land to the community. 25% of the units were set aside for those with disabilities using 811 vouchers. I'm not going to go into the details here, but the biggest challenge is when you are looking at developing housing for neuro-inclusive communities, you need to make sure that the rental subsidy that you are, the rental subsidy that you're going after will serve the intended population. That was the biggest challenge that we had at the Elizabetta and the Stella. Additionally, you need to make sure that you have that ongoing services funding, and that it's a guaranteed source of funding. But the really exciting thing is that we are all here because we care about it and we're excited, and Colorado is catching on, and I think there are going to be other funding sources available for us. So I'm going to pass it along to Wayne. My contact information is right there.
Dance. Right here. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Wayne McClary. I'm in 5 minutes housing development specialist. Okay. I'm a team manager for housing development for Division of Housing. We're part of the Department of Local Affairs. I've got less than 5 minutes now, so I've got my name out there. So I think we're talking again this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So this will be somewhat abbreviated. I'll just kind of fly through these. The slides that you have. Basically, here's how we're organized. I won't go through that. Here's some of the things we've done since 2020. Won't go into that. Prop 123. I will go into that. This is basically, we have 2 types of funding that we're doing at Prop 123. Basically, your local jurisdiction has to opt in. We're doing Prop 123 called AHOP, Affordable Housing Opportunities, or Affordable Housing Opportunities Program, AHOP. Oh, Affordable Housing Homeownership Program, that's AHOP. And then also we have the Persons Experiencing Homelessness, which is Prop 123 PEH. So those 2 funding amounts are coming out. We're sending out emails, blast emails from our division director, Allison George, about once every 45 days or so. So if you reach out to us and get our DOH newsletter, you see how much money we have available for those things for Prop 123. We've also got some limited federal funds, but that's very limited. We're going to have maybe about 6.7 million available in December. I'm not sure how much we're going to have other times, but that's also changing. Home and CDB, I won't get into that right now. Biggest thing is on this chart, when you're doing a project, you start with concept, then you go into feasibility. And then basically the financial structuring, that's where we get involved. As a division of housing, we're what you call as a gap funder. So if you can imagine a $30 million project that you're working on, and you need another 2 to 3 million to get to the finish line, to get to closing. At that point, you will contact the Division of Housing. We'll look at your project. We'll look at everything that's been done. What kind of financing has already gone into it? Did you have productivity bonds? Did you get CHFA tax credits? We're looking at the whole shebang, basically making sure that this is the project that's worth funding and going to school on what the other previous lenders have already done, the perm lenders, the investors. And then we're trying to figure out how much money we can give your organization to help you get to the finish line. So just because you request $3 million doesn't mean you're going to get $3 million. However, if you request 3, we say, hey, you might need 4, you'll get 4. So, but that's what we're primarily focused on. And that yellow box is what I call the financial structuring. Actually, the real term was it should be called deal making. That was turned down by my bosses. They maybe turned it back to financial structuring and make it less exciting. And then ultimately to get to the project and construction operations. Okay, so rather than having word charts, we joined the 2020s, and now we just have these handy UR codes that you can scan. Then you can get our housing development specialists. We've also got some meter asset managers and also our DOH funding application website. Highly encourage you to go to that because things are changing quite a bit. And hopefully, do you all have this available, this slide deck in your materials? I hope so. We'll talk to Tim Dolan then, if he's back there somewhere. And then also subscribing to the DOH newsletter. That's very important right now because we are having a lot of changes at Division of Housing. So those of you that are familiar with working with us, the last few years, you guys are doing things a lot more different now. So we're right in the middle of change. So that's it. Go back one slide.
You are.
Mary.
And could you talk a little bit about DOH's willingness to put a portion of supportive services into the expense budget
Yes.
for housing?
Oh man, that's my wheelhouse. Okay, I'll go past the 5 minutes from now on. Basically, when we're looking at supportive services, you're looking at what we call permanent supportive housing, and I think I saw Desiree back there. Neuro-Inclusive Housing would definitely would qualify for that. We look at persons that have drug abuse, persons that are having physical, intellectual development disabilities. Those all fit into the supportive housing spectrum. And essentially what we're looking at is for those populations that score pretty high on the VI/SPDAT, the vulnerability index, they qualify for supportive housing. For a project to be considered supportive housing, it has to have 25% units that in that supportive. What we generally do is we understand that you have the normal expenses on running a property. And so that's called sometimes OpEx or operating expenses. For us, it's in our spreadsheet, it's called the income and expense tab. And then what we have for supportive housing is we have a whole different set of issues. And so that is what we call our services contribution. So there, if your organization is seeking out an IDD or a support services provider, vendor, then basically you're put on a separate set of expenses. And we work with those expenses. We have a separate set of funding sources and seeing how much you can pay for, what's expected to cost. So what there are a lot of sources such as Medicaid reimbursements, HOST or Denver HOST, the state of Colorado will provide funding so that you can help pay for those support services. And then we have that on a whole separate tab in our spreadsheet. And we look at basically how much money you're going to bring in, what do we expect it to cost every year? And then what we'll do is we'll allow you to inflate your revenues by 2%, but you will inflate your expenses by 3%. And then the whole idea is to make sure that the project is just from a services standpoint is covering those expenses for 15 years. Did that answer your question, Mary?
It does. And if you and other agencies that are dealing in this wheelhouse, if you can continue to look at people who are living with a parent over 60 as at risk of being homeless.
Yep.
They don't get picked up on the VIs for that.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too, because we're getting into the home sharing, which is something that I don't know if any of you know of, I forget the name, homesharing.org, that's in the company and Allison Dukowski, but the home sharing is basically older individuals. I guess I'm getting to be one of them, you know, and it allows us to rent out a portion of our house so that basically an older person in say their 70s, 80s, 90s can stay at their house, rent out a portion of their house to someone that's much younger, and they can also help out with some of the household duties and things like that. But it's something that's kind of growing. It's been I talked to Allison Jacosi for years. So, but now it's going to be more popular. So, any more questions? Yes, sir.
Are there specific funding sources for your diverse development?
I wish, not yet, not yet. Right now, we still, That's still kind of put to the support services, which I think is still probably the closest we have to it as far as from state is our, Prop 123 PEH funding. Desiree.
Want to mention for those in the room, if you have a piece of property or a partner that has a piece of property, CHFA has a great small scale technical assistance program that now has a neuro-inclusive component. And so it has to be projected to be potentially 30 units or less. So we're not talking about a LIHTC funded property in the future. But it is a great resource where you can get some technical assistance, community engagement, architectural renderings, development of a pro forma. It's done some great work in Colorado already. So those applications open up in the beginning of the year and in the fall as well. So twice a year. It's a pretty easy 2-page application, but you have to have land already.
And part of this extra time, like in soccer, basically, or I shouldn't say football, that's probably the right term. This is an example of why we're here. So basically, this was Fitzsimmons Gateway. This was my development with the George Thorne, if any people know him. And basically, this project, he did a lot more than 5 million. We were able to get him 5 million. He was able to get the gap solved. But basically, it's about 210 units, and you can see we're serving persons from 30% of A mile all the way up to 70. So, but this is a nice, it's being built right now, just sitting operating a couple months ago. But this is an example of the finish line when we get there. That's it. Thank you. What was that? That's a news. What was that?